Hello, and welcome back to The Path. My guest today is Perry Campbell Sensei, a Kabuto and Rushokai practitioner from Northern Ontario, Canada. Campbell Sensei in the late 80s and early 90s had the awesome opportunity to train with Yagi Dai Sensei in the Meibuken as Yagi Sensei was developing certain number of his signature Meibuken Kata. In this episode, we talk about the development of those kata, how he thinks Kabuto helps karate, as well as his future plans and his upcoming gassuku that who want to join can find the links in the description. My apologies, as this episode is coming out rather close to when the gashuku is happening, but if you do have the time, I would highly recommend going and training with Perry Sensei and Paul Babadella Sensei. Okay, without further ado, let's jump right into the episode. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
For people who might not know who you are, could you give us a background of your training?
Well, my name is Perry Campbell, and I'm from Northern Ontario, Whitefish Falls, to be exact. A little tiny, I don't even know if it's large enough to be called a village. It's not. I don't even think it's large enough to be called a hamlet. I live in the suburbs of that. I'm in a very, grew up in a very private, secluded bay. And as far as martial arts go, I was quite an overweight young lad, and saw a Bruce Lee movie, and I wanted to be just like that, and which I think most everybody did back then. And but you couldn't just go to a dojo. This is back in the 70s, the mid 70s. You couldn't just go to a dojo and join up, or because there was no dojos. There was a couple in Sudbury, I think, and it was in 1977 that a man named Israel Sagara moved to Whitefish Falls, and he started teaching karate. And I remember that one like it was yesterday, because one of my friends from the village said, "Are you going to karate tonight?" He's like, "What?" And this guy had started. It was his second class that was happening that night, and I didn't know anything about it. I was quite upset that I hadn't heard, and that was in 1977, and I started then, and it was rather lucky. That's where I started karate.
And how was the training when you first started?
That I still am very grateful that I started under Sensei Israel. I thought he was pretty phenomenal, and his whole ideas were very far ahead of people around here. That training is different. I think it was a watered down. When it came to Japan, goju-ryu is what we took, of course, and he taught. And so when karate in Japan is a little different than karate in Okinawa, and then when I got to the U.S. and then subsequently Canada, it was quite a bit different, watered down. But the training was hard. I mean, I think you'd be charged for assault if you tried to teach a class like that today. I mean, we'd do things like running a gauntlet and everybody punching and kicking at you, and lots of sparring, free sparring, and lots of basics, which, I mean, everybody sees the importance of basics, but not much partner basics, but he sure did a lot of conditioning and back then that just didn't happen in other of the dojos I went and visited when the early 80s, when I went to college in the city. I went to dojos, and there wasn't the conditioning that we used to do. So I think that really helped prepare me for the first time I went to Okinawa, which is a bit of a lie. I wasn't prepared at all for how hard it was, but more of the six of us that went the first time I went to Okinawa, I lasted the longest in terms of being able to take the pounding. I think that's maybe part of it is sheer stubbornness, but I was definitely a little better prepared than the other guys. One guy, I remember day one, he couldn't get hit in the arms anymore when we went in 86, the first time I went to Okinawa. No, sorry, 88. So it did help me prepare.
And somewhat. How long did you train with Israel Sensei?
I trained for 9 years, and I still feel very fortunate that it was him that I trained with. Not only his ideas, but he was not repressive. He didn't, like so many teachers that I see, he would try to hold their students under their thumb and don't let them go out. And his only his only request of me was, don't forget your roots, and please bring home what you've learned. And I've always still maintained a close relationship with him. I don't really do his karate per se, but I do share all the time with him. And I know he studied yoga, and he lived in a yoga institute for years. So I was able to, I'm still able to learn those concepts from him. And then when I taught karate with him, his way of looking at things actually sometimes helps me to unlock the techniques within, like the applications that I don't think in some cases I wouldn't have been able to. So I was 9 years with him, and then I was searching. So that's a story in itself. I was searching. I thought there had to be something more. I remember getting into a bar fight, and in 1984, maybe three. And I did come out on top of that one. I've only had a handful of fights in my whole life, but I remember being on the ground and some guy grabbing me by the shoulder, and his with his left hand, his right hand was going like a tripwire, or trip hammer, which is not what you normally practice in karate. You step in and hold that nice form of a punch while you do your stuff, and it was just different. He wasn't doing it right. I thought there's got to be something. It's like you're not playing fair. You're supposed to stand there and wait for me to do my stuff, But then I started looking. There's got to be something more to this. I felt like I had the shell of the egg. I felt like I didn't have the whole egg. And I boxed for 3 years then, and I lived in a jiu-jitsu school in Toronto for a year, and I wasn't there quite a year. I guess I was there 11 months. But searching, and then I met a man who had been to Okinawa, and he'd been there for 2 weeks to Okinawa, and he only trained at the Yagi dojo for a week, and he came back, and there was a difference in his karate, a real difference, and I started working under him, and my best friend and I, Rick Ross, and well, that was it. We did actually when we did the karate. When we made the changeover, I've talked to a number of people. I'm not sure how people do it today. I'm not really out there as much as I used to be in terms of going out to meet people and sharing that. Most of the people that I know now I'm either going to learn or I'm going to teach, and it's not even all that often anymore. But when I started doing decided I wanted to make a changeover to the Okinawan kata, because what I saw was, it was much stronger, and I know back then people used to say we wanted to start doing Okinawan karate, but they would try to retain what they did, and they were trying to do both. And I remember I put on videotape all the kata, the Japanese goju-ryu, but it really I guess would be Japanese Canadian goju-ryu, and I put them all on video, and I never did them again, not once, and just tried to learn remember learning up to cipher that first time I was there. And then the next time learning a couple more. So, and that's how I made the changeover. And at the time I was with my closest friend was a guy named Rick Ross, who you know well. And I remember coming back. He couldn't come to London with me when we went to train that time. And he met me when I got home on Sunday. And he asked me about it. It was a very brief conversation. He said, "So what do you think?" I said, "I like it. I'm gonna start doing that." We were teaching at the YMCA in Sudbury, and he says to me, "I said I'm gonna start doing that, and I'm gonna teach it." I said, "If you want to do it with me, then we'll do it together. And if you don't, I completely understand. I'll just back out of the Y. You keep teaching, and I will, when I do know enough that I could, if I need to start teaching, because I'm not going to, wasn't about to move to Southern Ontario, then I'll start teaching a class in Okinawa and goju-ryu. So I didn't know how long that would take. And I remember his exact words were, you think it's better? Yeah. You really like this? You're going to do it? Yeah. He paused for a moment. Then he said, I'm in. And he did the same thing I did. He put all the kata that he knew on video, which I have lost that footage now because he's gone. And that's it. We just switched over and we just did Okinawa and Meibuken is what we did. So, and that was in 86 that we did that.
Okay. And you said you'd mentioned that your first time to Okinawa was in 88. Was that correct?
In 88. Yes. I went with a group of, I think there were 6 of us that went. And I was absolutely blown away. You know, I could do. I was no superstar karate. I had a few trophies and a few firsts, few seconds in sparring and in kata. But I was certainly no tournament champion. But I could do some what I thought. I mean, not like a taekwondo person, but I could do some pretty dynamic kicks. I thought I could break boards, jumping and spinning and stuff. And I can remember going to Okinawa to the Yagi dojo, the Meibuken dojo, Hambu, and I can remember asking someone who could speak English as they're talking, being very nervous. And but I can remember asking, "How many kicks do you do?" Meaning, I was meaning, of course, like the kinds of kicks. And of course, with the language barrier, the first response was, "Oh, we just do we do lots of kicks, you know." And me in a class, they were thinking the number. And then finally, I was able to say what make them understand what kind of kicks you did. And I can remember thinking, thank God I didn't voice this, but they said we do 2 kicks. I'm thinking 2. God, they're going to be impressed with me, because they did only a front snapping kick and then that knee kick. And I knew in my mind that they were going to be blown away by me. And they weren't, by the way, because I could not block their kick without it. It felt like it was going to break my wrist. And when they blocked mine, I could barely put my leg down on the floor. It hurt so badly on the shins. I don't know. In the past, I've heard people put down conditioning, and I don't think you have to condition like we did, but without any conditioning at all, I think that someone who believes that adrenaline will kick in if they ever have to use it, they'd be, they'd be in for an awful shock if they were ever really going to fight, and someone who was conditioned locked shin to shin with them, So, anyways, yeah, it was. And again, going back to what I said earlier about how did that prepare me, or the training, what was it like? I was of the 6 of us that went there. There was one guy on day 1. He couldn't take any more conditioning on the arms. Day 1, on a 6-week trip to Okinawa, and then it was one by one they dropped off, and I think I lasted 3 weeks till I finally got hit once so badly in the arm. I remember I'm lying against the wall on the floor like this, and I'm almost going into shock. I'm sure I had a hairline fracture in my forearm, but. I was amazed, and that was in 88, and I decided that I was going to I needed to move back there, so I did end up moving back in 1990 and 91.
So how was the training in the that first trip? Was it like a training with both the brothers and the father, or?
We trained with all 3. With the father, Yagi Dai Sensei, we would train pretty much every day, if I remember right, for a session in the morning. And then train with Meitoku Sensei would often come in the afternoon and work with us. At that particular time, he wasn't working. I think he had a disagreement with he was a high school teacher. I think he had a disagreement with the principal, and for that particular short time, he was not teaching. He was working as a parking lot attendant. And so he had the time to come over, and he would work with us in the afternoons. And then there was the evening classes with Meitoku Sensei on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And he also, if I remember correctly, well, it was quite a while back, wasn't it? He also had a couple of evenings as well, added Tuesday and Thursday. And then there was in Nagata Dojo on Saturday and Sunday up in the Nagata area. So we did that. So.
And I know you also do Ryukyo Kobudo. When did you start doing that?
I didn't start that till after I had moved to Okinawa in 1990. And I'd seen video footage from Akamine Sensei's dojo from the guy in Southern Ontario who had introduced me to Okinawan karate. So I went to Okinawa, and of course I couldn't speak the language. And even when I left there after that time, I could kind of get by really roughly. Like I could by asking over and over again and them changing things, I could understand what people were saying, but I was woefully limited. But at that time I was trying to find a dojo. I knew approximately where it was, and truly I was standing in front of it 6 or 7 times in front of the dojo. The old dojo was now just a storage shed, and they built a new dojo in the back. And had I been able to read Japanese, I'd have seen on the wall behind big Ryukyu Kobudo, Hombu Dojo. And but I went in. I finally, there was a man named Anthony Marakian who was a pioneer for Meibuken goju-ryu and bringing it back to the United States, Massachusetts, Watertown, I believe. And he was able, through to the hotel he was staying at, the man who worked there was fluent in Japanese and in English. And he called and he made an appointment with me at the dojo. And so I went to Akamine Sensei's dojo through this arrangement through this man, through Marakian Sensei. And now we're getting back to that. I couldn't speak any Japanese at the time. And I found out later that Akamine Sensei himself wasn't all that great in Japanese. He spoke Hogan. And so I go to the dojo and it's pretty awkward. It was on the morning. It's kind of awkward because I can't understand each other, and I have my bag with me and kind of looking around, and finally Akamine Sensei brings me back to the change room. And so I go back and I change and I come out and there's kind of looking around. It's very awkward. Now I had originally went there hoping to learn a bow kata and a sai kata, and I was really hoping to learn an eiku kata. And maybe if I had been able to speak the language, I might have got those. I might have got none of them. I don't know, right? But I couldn't speak anything, and it was kind of humorous. It was very awkward. And then he just hands me a bow, and he starts teaching me the first kata, Shushino Kon Sho, and then we worked out for an hour and a half, and then he took me over when we were finished. He took me over to the calendar. Between the calendar and the clock on the wall, I was able to see that he had Kobudo classes, but it was the same. It was Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, the same time Meitoku Sensei had a class. So I couldn't come, and I made him, and I was able to make him understand that. So then through the clock and the calendar, I was coming in the next day, and then it was every day, Monday to Friday. I was coming in at 11 o'clock in the morning. So I was doing this for a month, and almost every class he knew I had to sneak to to his classes. I was able to get by that the Yagi brothers weren't very happy. Like, they would not have been open to my going there, so I was sneaking there. He thought that was kind of humorous, but then he was able to. He showed me that, like, trying to get me to come to the class, and it was a month after I'd been going for 5 days a week that I skipped one of Meitoku Sensei's classes, and I remember I show up at the dojo. And the dojo was it had a bit of an alcove. It was kind of L-shaped, a small L. And as I walk in the dojo, there's a bunch of people. I'd never seen anyone there because it was always just Sensei and I. And there's a bunch of people practicing Kobudo. And Sensei peeks his head around the corner, and then his head disappears back. And I hear him, I don't know what he's saying, but it's probably like, that's him, that's the guy. You know, I'm guessing that. But this guy comes around the corner, and I can't remember his name. I only saw him a couple of times afterwards, again, because of the times that I could go. And he taught English at one of the universities. I can't remember which one. And he introduced himself. And then he said, my teacher wants to know, what do you want? What are you doing here? And so I told him why I had originally come, which was hopefully to learn those 3 kata. And that since coming there, that Sensei had been teaching me from the beginning, and that I would be really honored if I would be able to keep doing that. And he went back and he talked to Sensei, and the voices were raised a little bit. Sensei had throat cancer, and so a raised voice for him wasn't that loud. And then he came back, and then he said, my teacher says that you train hard and you seem to have a good heart, and he'll accept you as a student, that you should be very honored that you're his last student. And I was very honored. So the next day, when I went into class, it would be in my own mind. I know that, but I just felt different. And I was wearing my black belt from karate, and there was a white belt hanging in the change room, and it just seemed the right thing to do, to put that on. And at the time, I don't think anyone was doing that there. They just wore their karate belt. But I was the first one. And when I went back a couple of years later after moving home, all people that were just starting Kobudo that I could see were wearing that white belt, you know. So I don't know if I started that, but it just felt right to me to put that on. And I remember he looked at it like, kind of looked at me and then shrugged when I had a white belt on that first time, and that was it, So, but it just felt like the right thing to do.
So you moved to Okinawa. You're training at the Meibuken Dojo, and you're training at the Ryukyu Kobudo Dojo.
And Santa Hana Sensei's dojo.
Oh, okay. Is that
but
when you
it
first
wasn't,
started?
I started. So it was Meraki. Go back to Merakian Sensei again from the U.S. He brought myself and Steve Radulovich and Paul LaFave. He brought and Mark Dodge. He brought us to the Yagi dojo, or not by Santa Hana Sensei's dojo. So that was he brought us there, and then Santa Hana Sensei invited us back. And at the time, it wasn't every time. It was we were pretty big to say Meibuken family. That was exact, a hand position like that. But every time I would say I was thinking of going to Santa Hana Sensei's dojo. Why do you want to go there? And but you said Meibuken family. It is Meibuken family. When are you going to go there? I was going to go there Tuesday. Oh, I was going to have a class Tuesday. So the Yagis would put on another class, and I sound rude saying that. I sound very disrespectful, but I snuck to the class. That was at the time. I believe that Santa Hana Sensei's, if not the, was one of the most powerful goju-ryu dojos in the world. I mean, you went there just a few years later, and they were still extremely powerful. That's when all the older guys were training. I was just awed by them. So I was training in the morning with Yagi Dai Sensei every morning, 7 days a week. At about 8 o'clock, we'd get there and train till about 9:30, and then I'd walk up to the Kabuto dojo, and I would train with Akamine Sensei Monday to Friday in the morning from 11 until 12:30, and then I'd walk over. I was walking, then I had a car for a short time, then I'd go over to, on my way back, it was a detour, I'd go to up the hill to Santa Hana Sensei's dojo. At that time, there'd be just me, but once in a while, Santa Hana Sensei would, if he was home, he was still working at the time, he would come and do something with me. And then I would walk back down to the apartment, which was very close to the Meibuken Hambu, and I would I remember I'd just lie on the mat because I was training. I was doing this every day, and maybe I'd get a half an hour, and then I'd pick myself up off the mat, and I would go back to the Hambu dojo, and I always made more noise than I normally did. I was pretty clumsy, I admit that, but I always made more noise than I normally would. And Dai Sensei came up all the time. And that wasn't, I can't say that was another class. I would, to say I trained with him there's truth there, but he would watch me. Usually, for some reason, it was usually he had me do Suparimpe and Kururufa, and he'd watch it. Sometimes he'd give corrections. Sometimes he'd just look away and look disgusted. And, but probably half the time he'd correct me. Then he'd go back downstairs, and then I'd go home again. And then I'd come back for the kids' class he had 3 times a week. And then I'd go back, and then I'd go to Meitat Sensei's class, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then I started skipping Wednesdays, and I was going to Santa Hana Sensei's class for the rest of the time that I was there. So Meitat Sensei never thought I trained that much. He never really liked me, I don't think. Well, I know, as a matter of fact. But I was training, I was training at Santa Hana Sensei's that night, and all the other. So I was training a fair amount. So, and then weekends, Saturday and Sunday, we're always at Meitet Sensei's with Dai Sensei in the morning, and then I would. I guess that was about it. Meitet Sensei, when after being there that long, it'd be when foreigners would come. I used to joke because I'd stand there with the Okinawa people. I'd say, "God, I hate when foreigners come," But I thought that was funny. I don't know if they thought that amusing, but anyways, so I would go to any class that they had with them that Dai Sensei would have an extra class for, Meitat Sensei or Meitat Sensei. I would make sure I went to that as well. So I don't know if they were thinking when foreigners would come. I don't know if they ever thought I was cutting in, and well, I was cutting in. I was just trying to get as much as I could, So
I don't know if I'm remembering it correctly, but so you went to Okinawa the first time, and then did you go another time before you moved, or?
No, not before I moved. Went in 88. It was I went in 95 again, and that was At that time, and when I went the second time or third, it would be the third time that I went. I was, I was kind of like I didn't officially have. I was never formally accepted. Some people say, "Oh, you're really lucky. You're Yagi Dai Sensei's last student, and you're Akamine Sensei's last student." Well, I was that one. The truth is, I was never formally accepted as Yagi Dai Sensei's student. He turned it over to his son. I think Paul Babadelas might be the last one formally accepted Yagi Dai Sensei student. It might have been Ken Talek too. I'm not sure, but I was lucky enough to get to train with him. But at the time, I was kind of sitting on the fence because everybody in the Meibuken, all foreign students were automatically Meitat Sensei students. And Meitat Sensei, of course, just I'm a student because all foreign students are, but it was clear to him that I wasn't really his student. And I never really thought very highly of me. I don't, maybe that was part of it. I don't know. Maybe that I didn't show him the respect I should have. I don't know. It could have been. Meitet Sensei, I got along really well with Meitet Sensei. He wanted to say you're my student, but he was the politics. He couldn't really come out and say it. I was sneaking to Santa Hana Sensei's. I was not, but I was not his student, and I was training with Dai Sensei the most. I mean, Akamine Dai Sensei and Yagi Dai Sensei, but I was never accepted as Yagi Sensei student. You know, I just got to train with him. But in '95 when I went, it was because Akamine Sensei, we were having a 25th anniversary of Taira Shinken Sensei's passing. And Akamine Sensei asked me to go. I would try to talk to him on the phone once every couple of weeks. And that was really pitiful attempt because of the language barrier. And what little I had when I got there was deteriorating rapidly. But I still made it a point. And they asked me to go, and I said I couldn't go. And there was a few reasons. One, it was the money. I didn't have much at the time, and the other was I knew when I went that it would be a nail in the coffin, that because the Yagi brothers definitely did not want me to go to Kabuto, and they didn't even know that I was going, and so I had to make a decision to go, and because it was when Akamine Sensei asked me first, I said I couldn't. And then his son got a hold of me and said, my father is not doing well, his health-wise. We don't think he'll be around longer. And this will be the last time you'll get to see him. You really need to come. He really wants you. And he wants all of the students there. So I went, and that was it. That Santa Hana Sensei, I'd been contacting him, and he understood. And he actually, at that same time, he accepted me as a student formally. And went in '95 for that. Then the only other time I've been back since then is 2009. So I haven't been there. Yeah, I've been very negligent going back. So.
Okay, so let's maybe shift gears a little bit and talk about how do you think that Kabuto helps with your karate training?
I think it's probably, first of all, I should clarify that there's some who'd say it's a detriment to it. Like Santa Hana Sensei hates the hip that I put into it because there's definitely more hip in the Kabuto because it's Shorin influence, and that influence has most definitely crept into my goju-ryu. And Santa Hana Sensei doesn't like that at all, probably. But without a doubt, when you get the hip, your power increases. And I don't mean it'll start to increase. I mean the day that you get the hip is the day that my power increased like hugely in my striking. So without a doubt, it helped me to make each technique stronger, to understanding how to use the hip. You know, so perhaps as I've come to learn later, the goju-ryu had their own hip movements. I never learned those, so I wouldn't know that's the way to, that will also make it stronger. But so not having that, you're just, Okinawans are always big on saying we have in karate, or Westerners have weak legs when I was living there. I don't know if they say that today, but they would say have weak legs. You know, and I found that kind of irritating because my legs are stronger than a lot of theirs. At least I thought. And you look at some of the people that would go over, and their legs were massive, you know, but they'd say weak legs. But I came to understand what they meant was Westerners are only using their upper body. They're not connected. So, and that helped me to connect my legs, my upper body, so that my technique became strong, you know. So,
okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and then even when the Santa Hana Sensei's last trip here, they had a grading, and a couple of people had graded too soon in that, but everybody was off. And Sensei made reference that their legs and their upper body are not working together. So I do know that that's still a problem with most Westerners. We don't. It's not together. It's just the upper body. You know, most Westerners are bigger than most Okinawans too. So do you really want to take someone who's already, say, 250 pounds, who already can hit like a Mack truck, and then teach them how to hit even harder? Is that a smart thing to do? You know, I don't. Maybe that's why I don't know. But anyways, we already know how to hit hard with, like, most of us, because of our size. Not my size, but bigger people. So you teach them how to use your whole body, and you create a Frankenstein almost, you know. So that wasn't my case, mind you. So.
Is there any other ways that your Kobudo has influenced your karate, or?
It's definitely helped to influence in terms of my tension or my body movement. In and out, I find it's helped make my footwork lighter, even though I've gained weight in the last few years. But I move better. I believe absolutely that that's a result of the way you move in Kobudo. I do believe that it helps to work it helps to tie it together for me. It's Shorin based, the Kobudo that I do, like Ryukyu Kobudo. Taira Shinken taught at the Yagi dojo, and he was a professional martial artist. He taught at other dojos as well, but he taught at the Meibuken dojo, and he taught a couple of Bo kata, and he really goju. It's taught what's taught there. The kata that he taught are very gojuized, for lack of a better word. I mean, I wasn't there, so one could say maybe he didn't teach it like that. It's just all the goju-ryu people. But that would be like saying all the goju-ryu people at the Yagi dojo were stupid. They weren't very smart. Obviously not the case. I do believe that Taira Shinken modified it, like, so that it would be the Kobudo should match the goju-ryu. I just happened to, because I started at the dojo, it was Shorin base, and I did my best to do it the way they were teaching it, you know. So
I've heard the same thing about Taira Shinken Sensei. Sort of adapting his Kobudo for whatever dojo he was in.
Well, you heard that also. Well, that's really promising. It makes me think I wasn't off base in my theory.
About at least 3 or 4 people I've heard the same thing from different sources.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Like I said, that theory of mine just doesn't sound that off base then, you
know. And so, would you think that? If people have the time to do Kobudo, it's a net benefit to their training, or?
I think absolutely it's a benefit of training if you have time. First, you need a sensei who's willing to let you do it. Some aren't. Some of the senseis, even in Okinawa, are very much to hold a student under their thumb, and they don't want that. But I do think it's very much a benefit to do it, and I also view it as if martial arts are like a pie, then to me, Kobudo is another piece of the pie. You know, I think it's all encompassing myself. But.
So, what kind of training do you do in the Kobudo? Is it mostly kata based, or?
I do half and half, kata and partner work. I never was one who like to collect kata and then just do the kata, and like I like to, if I can't make it, apply it physically against another weapon or against someone without a weapon, to me there's no point in doing it. It's not what I'm into, you know. So it's 2-man, but all prearranged 2-man, no free sparring. I did try free sparring a couple years ago, and I was with a bull. The guy had some practice sparring bulls. They're kind of floppy. but it was kind of fun. I got hit a few times, but I surprised myself, and I know that I surprised them that a bow could move like that, because over here they hadn't seen that. So the guys that I was sparring with, one of them, he's an Arnis instructor, really good at what he does, really good. I was just able to surprise them with the way I could move the bow that they hadn't seen over here. So.
Oh, and so after you moved from Okinawa back to Canada, you open up a school, or?
The school was open before. I started teaching in '85, I guess, with Rick, a friend I was talking about earlier, who you know well, of course. And so I had a school when I left, and Rick ran it while I was gone. And when I moved back, then Rick was still coming out, but then it was just me running it at that point. And but when I came back, we weren't very good at the business. I was trying to do it full time for a short time, for a couple of years. I sucked at it. I was terrible at the business aspect. Invariably, it was very rare a month didn't go by that I wasn't paying. It ended up I was paying out of my pocket to teach karate, and then also the techniques themselves. They started to know my name at the emergency ward, because people were going in with hairline fractured forearms, and so that's not really conducive to make a living, in karate, because it didn't appeal to as many people when you're getting bruised and banged up. But yeah, I was teaching prior to that, and I moved the school, then bought a house and put the school in a basement after that. That way I didn't have the high overhead, and got a real job, and stayed like that for another 10 years. And then I moved to a small community, and I just had a few students coming up then.
So your student, you have probably a handful now, like 5 or so, or?
I have, I don't know if I'd say 5. To say regular students who will come out, 4 or 5, all black belts. I was teaching at the Y again until 2 years ago for 8 years. So I had quite a few then, quite a few, meaning 20. And that's not including the children. And but since I moved back to the little community I grew up in. I built a home in behind the old place that I grew up in. I'm on the lake looking out, and I have not started a class since moving back here. So I'm just working with black belts now. With Dale, my senior student, I work with him weekly. With a couple of others, I get together with 2-3 times a month, and that's about it right now. I'm a shift worker, so it's pretty difficult to start a dojo when you're on shifts with new people. It was different at the Y in Sudbury. I was a shift worker then also, but people that started like when you had started, they came back, and if I wasn't there because I was working, I knew who was going to be teaching that night. I didn't have to worry. So but I can't do that here because there's nobody out here. So
maybe we should maybe talk about the Meibuken Kata.
Okay.
I think a lot of people would be quite interested in hearing about the development of those kata. You've written at least one article in a magazine about them.
I wrote one article. It was a good article, except that I screwed up on the directions at the end. I wrote it down and I put a direction wrong. So everything I wrote would appear to be, if you have one blatant error in the end of an article, it kind of loses credibility for the rest, But that article was right from the heart, That was because I was fortunate that when I trained with Yagi Sensei, I trained every day with him and he really emphasized his kata. And a lot of people do them, but no one does them quite like I do, because he made the changes. He would sit in a chair with me, and there's not changes to all of them. I have to emphasize that, but especially Genbu was the main one, but also a little bit for Shujaku. Genbu was a big one that he sat, because I think Yagi Sensei first is amazing because he made these kata up in his head. I'm sure he worked them. I'm sure he obviously worked them like physically while he was making them up, but in his head, it's against a partner. And he said that he first of all, he developed the kata from going to Taiwan, and that they have forms, and then it becomes a two-man form and working with a partner. So he made these up because he thought the idea was good. But when he did it when he made these kata up, he took seiru and byako. Now, seiru, you do it when you're working with a partner, you do it other than you do it in a straight line, but you do it the same way you do the regular kata, but with its mirror image, byako, you do it exactly that, a mirror image. And so you'd start the kata off like the mirror image of what you would do it if you're doing a solo. And I just think that that's absolutely brilliant that he did that in his head. And then you can go up with a partner, because then he showed me how to do it with a partner and what he wanted. And when you do the mirror image, it fits almost perfectly. But it didn't fit almost perfectly for Shujaku and Genbu. So I could say that with Shujaku, or Genbu and Shujaku, but especially Genbu, no one does it like I do it, because I did it over 100 times without a doubt, with him he'd sit in a chair in the middle of the dojo, and he'd just kind of look at me and his head would go off, and then he'd make a change. And by the time he was finished making those changes, they go together with a partner perfectly. And I just think that's amazing that he's able to do that. It's like I've heard some people say that he didn't know tea, and some people say he chose not to teach tea. I tend to think that he had chosen not to teach tea, because those katas are full of it. You know? As I learned bits and pieces from people like Onaga Sensei and Charlie Peterson Sensei and Paul Babadella Sensei and other people, learn some tea concepts. There's many times I'll think, Dai Sensei showed me something like that, and I just was not smart enough to realize what he was teaching, you know. So I do think he knew about it.
I don't see many people performing them at demonstrations or anything like that. Do you think that many people still keep them up, or?
I know that Santa Hana Sensei has stopped doing them. And being a student of Santa Hana Sensei's, and none of his other students do. I know that some people in here that trained under me back here in Canada, they've stopped doing them because Santa Hana Sensei doesn't want to do them. I know that there's some other people in Southern Ontario that have stopped doing them as well. So I think it's because they didn't have, maybe they didn't have the teaching. So if they only have a few, like the rudimentaries of it, some people just feel maybe they feel that they don't know enough, so they don't keep it up, you know. I feel obligated to keep doing them because Dai Sensei spent so much time, you know. So.
Oh, and how long did he work those katas out with using you as a?
That we were actually sitting there, and him sitting in a chair watching me and having me do them over and over, a month for sure, just doing that. Like that wasn't all we did for the class, but after he'd do stuff with me. Like he could go through the whole Meibuken course syllabus. He'd go through that in 20 minutes, 25 minutes, all the kata and all the ippon, and all the. And sometimes he'd do the ippon and nippon with me. Then he weren't going hard because he's Dai Sensei, right? But he'd go through it. And but if he had somebody with me, then he could do it as quickly as that. But in terms of it was usually the afternoon session. Remember I said I would go and stomp around and make more noise? For about a month, he would sit in the chair. So there was a good month's worth of work there, particularly with it was a Shujaku Genbu combination that he really worked, like making the changes with that one. The other ones they're the same. I mean, he still had me doing them, but those are the ones that he had altered the most, especially in particular Genbu, because it was the mirror image one.
And I guess Tenshi was, I think, if I remember correctly, was created in the 70s or 80s?
In the late 70s, yeah. And that was the one where he went to, he had a close friend in Taiwan, and the Japanese pronunciation for the kanji of his name, Koshinko. There's some video, actually on my Facebook page, there's a video footage of him that was doing something. But Dai Sensei thought very highly of him and worked. I also know that he worked a lot with Uechi Sensei, Kane Uechi Sensei. I also know he worked a lot with Higa Ichoku Sensei. But he definitely also worked a lot with Yagi Dai Sensei. And that was from Taiwan, like I was saying earlier, the fact that the Chinese have forms that you can do it solo or do it with a partner. So that was why he had made that up. And that was his first try. So, and it's divided in half. He taught it as two parts. And then after it was, it's all just one kata now. It was Fukyo Kata, Ichi Fukyo Kata Ni at one time. That's what he called.
So is there anything else that you want to talk about, or coming up on close 50 minutes?
Is it really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? I don't know. I like that. I know you're doing it. You did the interview with Paul. I'd really like that. Paul and I met Paul Babadella Sensei in 1989, and the reason I'm bringing it up is because you did an interview with him, and we're coming up this May. It was 30 years that we've been friends, close friends, like brothers. You know, Rick and I went down there. Again, mentioning Rick, 30 years ago in May. So this May coming up is 30 years, and we're making. I don't know. Like, I'm not saying it's going to be really big, but we're definitely going to make it a point to commemorate that, because I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they're out there. Just my limited in terms of getting around, but I don't know anyone who's had that close of a relationship for 30 years and still sharing, and and no egos got in the road. I was personally just grateful that someone of his level of ability would think enough of me to be my friend, let alone and share. He always says it's a sharing relationship, and it is a sharing relationship, but believe me, it's more like 70-30, or maybe 80-20 with me giving the 20, so that's coming up. He's quite a phenomenal man. So we have this 30-year anniversary coming up.
And that be in May? Or?
Well, it's in May, but we're doing the gassuku at the end of April, April 26th, May 7th. So we have a gassuku, Rushokai gassuku in Michigan every April. And we have another one in Canada every August, which we restarted. We'd gotten away from that, but we restarted that about 7 years ago. So it's the April one that we're doing, end of April, that we're doing the commemorating the 30 years. So,
is that open to the general public, or is it just
open to everybody? Open to everybody, yeah.
If someone's interested in it, they can find it
so
on
anyone
Facebook?
Interested, if they do goju-ryu, I'll admit they'll probably get the most out of it, because we'll be covering goju-ryu kata and applications, techniques. But there's also we'll be doing a lot of tea concepts, and so it's open to everybody. Everybody will get something out of it.
And they can find that on Facebook, or
they can find it on Facebook. Facebook's probably the best, so they can contact me directly. My email address, or they can contact right now. Babadella Sensei's in Costa Rica, but they could also contact Mark Lester in Michigan, or myself.
Okay. So if someone's interested in getting some training with you guys, you're open for that?
Absolutely. Be happy to have anybody